They say betrayal stings hardest when it comes from those who once cheered the loudest. But what if the real betrayal isn't from an enemy? What if it's from the man wearing your red hat? Tonight's story begins not in the shadows, not in secrecy, but under the blinding lights of a congressional hearing. And sitting at the center of that heat, arms crossed, jaw locked, ego armored, is Donald J. Trump. Not the fighter of the forgotten man, not the builder of the border wall, but the author of a bill so destructive, so wrapped in patriotic buzzwords, even Elon Musk, yes, that Elon Musk publicly walked away from the wreckage. The bill was named the Big Beautiful Bill. What a name. Marketed like a steakhouse special, sold like a second-term miracle, but exposed on national television as a political grenade dressed in glitter. And the woman holding the pin? Letitia James. No greetings, no pleasantries. She walked into the chamber with the bill clutched in one hand and fire in the other. No warm-up, no throat clearing, just 5 words straight to the camera. It's not beautiful. It's a bomb. The room went still. The kind of still that makes reporters stop typing. The kind of still that makes even the partisan cheerleaders in the back row forget what side they're on. The lights hit Trump square in the face, but he didn't blink. Not once. He sat there, flanked by aides, wrapped in silence, as Letitia's voice rose not in volume, but in impact. "You called it economic fuel," she said. "But Elon Musk, your favorite capitalist, your go-to innovator, the man you once called a genius, just called it what it is: bankrupting." Behind her, the screen flickered on. A single tweet filled the air with more weight than 1,000 press conferences. October 5th, 2025. It's not beautiful. It's bankrupting. Elon Musk, no hashtags, no spin. Just blunt, forced truth from the man Trump once described as the future of American industry. Letitia didn't pause. She didn't gloat. She just turned to the president and delivered the line like a verdict. "If this bill is your crown," she said, "then Musk is the man who ripped it off your head in front of the entire country." Gasps didn't echo. They simmered. Because it wasn't just about tax policy. It was about perception. It was about the man behind the microphone suddenly standing on stage without the endorsement of the tech titan he once paraded as a badge of credibility. And the worst part? Musk didn't attack. He didn't campaign. He just walked away. Quiet, precise, devastating. And if you know Trump, you know this. Silence from a billionaire hurts more than 1,000 CNN panels. Letitia James came not to speculate, not to debate. She came to expose. What followed was not a hearing. It was a slow-motion car crash of ego, economics, and electoral illusions. And as she set the chamber ablaze with her opening strike, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a policy fight. This was the beginning of a public undressing. And the first thread pulled wasn't by a Democrat. It was by Elon Musk in 280 characters. The silence of Elon Musk wasn't just strategic, it was surgical. And Letitia James, sensing blood in the water, didn't waste time circling. She went in for the incision. Picking up where she'd left off, her voice now steady like a prosecutor laying out a timeline of betrayal, she reminded the room of a peculiar photo op back in January 2025. Musk, standing next to Trump at Mar-a-Lago, had grinned for the cameras and called him the only man bold enough to break America's rusty fiscal machine. It was a love fest. Billionaire meets bulldozer, the disruptor and the drainer of swamps. MAGA's tech crown jewel was, for a brief moment, shining under the Florida sun. But, as Letitia coolly noted, by September, that same sun had set and Musk had vanished. No farewell dinner, no angry press conference, not even a half-hearted "we agree to disagree." Just a canceled meeting, a quietly scrubbed schedule, and one sharp tweet. I have no comment. The bill speaks for itself. No hashtags, no logos, no follow-up. The equivalent of watching a man walk out of a burning building without so much as checking if anyone else smelled smoke. The screen behind Letitia flickered again, this time playing a clip from the Silicon Valley Financial Forum. Musk, no longer flanked by bodyguards or political handlers, leaned into the mic and delivered the kind of quote you don't recover from in a presidency built on bravado. "Peter Navarro," he said, eyebrows raised and tone flat, "is a fool. This tax bill will wreck what we built with Doge. Completely backwards." The audience in that forum laughed, but on Capitol Hill, no one was laughing. Because what Musk had said wasn't just about policy, it was about stupidity. Willful stupidity. The kind you don't fix with another slogan or hat. Letitia flipped a page, revealing a chart that should have made any so-called business president sweat. Tesla's engagement with the federal government had dropped 70% since September. 7-0. Not a typo. Not a blip. A deliberate, calculated retreat by one of the most strategically aggressive companies on Earth. "The numbers don't lie," she said, her voice calm but lethal. While this administration was busy tweeting about patriotism, America's most influential CEO was moving his calendar out of Washington. It wasn't just a PR snub, it was economic war by omission. And here's where Letitia twisted the blade. "Donald Trump claims to represent American business," she said, locking eyes with the man himself. But when one of the most powerful business leaders walks away quietly, intentionally, completely, what does that say about the man in the chair? The answer, of course, hung in the air like the stale breath of a bad deal. And Trump, never one to absorb humiliation in silence, leaned into the microphone like a man itching to punch through a teleprompter. "Musk should worry about building cars that don't burst into flames in Detroit," he muttered, voice flat, tone bitter. "Before telling me how to run a country." The room didn't explode in laughter. It didn't gasp either. It just paused. Because the joke didn't land. It wasn't funny. It was desperate. A cheap jab at a man no longer even present. The kind of insult that makes you wonder if the speaker is trying to convince you or just himself. Letitia didn't flinch, didn't blink. She simply raised an eyebrow as if to say, "That's it?" And then, with all the grace of a political surgeon, she delivered the next line like a scalpel gliding down the sternum. "When Musk endorsed you, it made headlines. When Musk left you, it made history." The silence that followed wasn't polite, it was damning. Because here stood a president who'd spent years branding himself as the champion of business, only to be quietly abandoned by the one man who once called him bold. And while Trump tried to deflect with a punchline about electric vehicles, the room knew what it had just witnessed. A very public unraveling, one quiet tweet at a time. But Letitia wasn't done, because this wasn't just about Musk leaving. This was about why he left, and what that silence really meant. And what happened next didn't just shake the hearing, it tore open the curtain on the president's real war. A war not against enemies abroad, but against the very people he once called allies. But the real blow didn't come from tweets or charts. It came from absence. It came from the one photo that never got taken. As the screen behind Letitia lit up again, what filled it wasn't noise. It was silence made visual. A shot of Elon Musk stepping off his private jet in Palm Beach, alone. No entourage, no press, no handshake waiting at Mar-a-Lago. A man who had once been fast-tracked through back doors at the White House now landed 15 minutes away and never bothered to visit. Letitia let the image sit there. She didn't explain it. She didn't need to. The absence of movement was the movement. It said more than any podium ever could. Then came the email. Not speculation, not opinion, but the kind of cold, unspun bureaucratic truth that tends to rot faster under sunlight. From the office of the White House secretary, meeting canceled. Not advantageous for optics. Mr. Musk declines all joint media appearances. In other words, the most famous innovator in America would rather shake hands with a cactus than stand next to Donald Trump on camera. Letitia didn't even bother hiding her smirk. She knew exactly what that meant, and so did everyone in that room. Then, almost casually, she flipped to a second screen this time, an internal Tesla communication. No photos, no media. We don't want association with BBB. The acronym landed like a punch. The big, beautiful bill, once Trump's chest-thumping centerpiece, now treated like toxic sludge by the very people it was supposed to empower. This wasn't some activist blog boycotting red hats. This was Tesla, the darling of Wall Street, the lodestar of tech capitalism, the same company Trump once praised as proof that America still makes things. Well, apparently, what it now makes is distance. Letitia turned back to the president, her tone suddenly low and surgical. "You weren't avoided, Mr. President," she said. "You were excluded. This isn't strategic silence. It's refusal. And not just any refusal, but from the man you once used as a business card. It wasn't grandstanding. It wasn't even theater. It was dissection." Trump, for all his showman instincts, didn't interrupt. He didn't smirk. He just stared, until the silence was too loud for even him to bear. Then, finally, he leaned forward, voice tight as a power cord. "I don't run this country to please CEOs," he snapped. "I run it to save the nation from CEOs who think they are the nation." It was classic Trump defiant, reverse populist, drenched in projection. The kind of line that sounds tough until you realize it's basically an admission that the nation's most successful industrialist wants nothing to do with you. That your flagship policy is so unpopular in boardrooms, even your allies need plausible deniability. And therein lies the irony. Trump built his brand on surrounding himself with titans of industry, posing with gold elevators, grinning through ribbon cuttings, using CEOs as living props. Now, one by one, the props are pulling back the curtain and walking off stage. And no matter how loud he barks about saving America from billionaires, it's not lost on anyone that the billionaires are the ones saving themselves from him. Letitia stood still, letting the moment breathe. The hearing room wasn't just watching anymore, it was processing. Not a debate, not a press conference, a political autopsy. And like any skilled coroner, Letitia had more than one incision to make. Because if Musk was the first to flee the photo op, the next question was who else had stopped showing up? And more importantly, what did they know that the rest of the country hadn't figured out yet? It's easy to wrap a bad idea in red, white, and blue. Just ask anyone who's ever seen Congress debate at lunchtime. But Letitia James didn't bother with the usual deference. As the spotlight landed on her, she jabbed a finger at the massive display screen and made the entire room swallow hard. Clause 13B of the Big Beautiful Bill blazed across the monitors. Corporate tax rate shall be doubled for all firms shifting production outside the United States. The font was bold. The subtext was bolder. This wasn't patriotism. This was extortion dressed up as a pep rally. "It sounds patriotic," Letitia said, voice clipped but ringing. "But what it really is a sucker punch to every American company fighting to survive in a world where the supply chain speaks 3 languages and costs are measured in nanoseconds." The audience didn't shift in their seats, they froze. On cue, she gestured again, and the screen flashed a cold, hard number. $3 billion. That's how much Tesla had just invested in a new plant in Monterrey, Mexico, an announcement made exactly 2 weeks before Trump's tax hammer came down. "You don't punish ingenuity," Letitia remarked dryly. "Unless, of course, you've run out of ideas and need someone else to blame." She let the silence stretch until it grew uncomfortable, then tossed out the next truth grenade. "You call these people your partners, Mr. President. Now you write laws to strangle them, all because their definition of growth is bigger than your border wall." It wasn't a rhetorical question. It was a stake through the heart of every Made in America bumper sticker ever slapped on a Chinese-made fender. Suddenly, the chamber filled with Trump's own voice, replayed over the speakers. "We will punish those who ship jobs overseas." He thundered a soundbite so rehearsed it practically begged for a laugh track. Instead, what followed was absolute, surgical silence. Wall Street suits stopped checking their phones. Even the interns looked up from their TikTok feeds. Letitia waited, then closed the thick bill folder with a snap that seemed to echo all the way to the CBO offices. "This isn't reform," she declared, every word a nail in the legislative coffin. "It's payback in a prom dress. A vendetta done up in the prettiest language your staffers could find. The only thing missing was a bow on top and maybe a warning label for financial toxicity." Trump, never one to take a jab without swinging back, sat up a little straighter. "I don't write laws to make Wall Street happy," he retorted, jaw set like he was trying to chew through a 2x4. "I write them to protect Main Street." But you could almost hear the eye rolls ricocheting around the hearing room. Main Street, after all, doesn't buy Teslas. Main Street doesn't invest $3 billion in Mexico. Main Street, if we're honest, mostly buys whatever's on sale at the nearest big box that survived the last round of tariffs. What Trump meant as a populist rally cry landed instead like a punchline in a joke only he was still laughing at. Letitia didn't even dignify it with a smirk. She let the room linger in the tension, let every person consider what it meant when patriotism was wielded as a cudgel against the very innovators who once fueled Trump's own boasts. Because in the end, it's not just about business or taxes or campaign slogans painted on 747s. It's about a president who dresses up retribution as reform and a nation forced to watch as the partners of yesterday become the targets of tomorrow. But as the legislative hangover set in, one question, bigger than any clause or campaign promise, hung over the room. Who, exactly, does the big beautiful bill protect, if not the future Trump promised? And as Letitia squared her shoulders for the next round, you could tell the real reckoning was only just beginning. If there was ever a moment when political theater mutated into raw corporate blood sport, it was this. Letitia James, not missing a beat, snapped open a folder thick enough to flatten a campaign manager, and with the flick of her wrist, the real show began. Up on the screen appeared the infamous slide. Navarro. Memo a V4 policy objective. Project a strongman image. The room didn't just stir, it bristled. Because suddenly, it wasn't about jobs or patriotism or even that tired chorus about America first. It was about power wielded for spectacle, broadcast for intimidation, and written down as proof for anyone bold enough to call the bluff. Letitia didn't let the audience look away. She read aloud, voice slicing through the marble silence. Direct attack on Musk and disloyal corporations. The message, those who don't march in line get left behind. There it was, no filter, no sugarcoat. Loyalty tests straight from the desk of Navarro, the economic Rasputin of the West Wing. The subtext wasn't even sub, it was headline news. Get on board or get run over. So, I have to ask, Letitia pressed, eyes never leaving Trump. Is this a bill or is this just a political threat disguised as reform? Are you building an economy or running a shakedown operation with better branding? Before the echoes could fade, the screen changed. This time, an internal White House comms email, shameless in its calculation, amplify the traitor frame for companies investing a broad, high-impact for media narrative. You could almost hear the word traitor echoing down cable news hallways before the ink was dry. The message was clear. Free markets for me, loyalty oaths for thee. If economic policy under this administration was a Broadway show, then the scriptwriters had clearly confused Hamilton with House of Cards. Letitia tapped her nails on the witness desk, slow and deliberate, the sound loud enough to break the spell. It's not data that's driving this, she said. It's anger. And maybe that plays in prime time, but the economy doesn't run on your outrage. It runs on confidence, on facts, on stability, not vendettas scribbled on napkins during a late-night Fox hit. The room, for a heartbeat, was quiet enough to hear egos deflate. Trump, ever the counterpuncher, wasted no time. He leaned in, chin out, voice sharp enough to shave paint off the walls. I don't write memos, he declared, not so much defending as dismissing the whole exercise. I write history. There was bravado in the claim, a kind of bulldog certainty, but also a strange, almost nervous glint in his eye because even the loudest strongman can't control what history records once the cameras stop rolling. Yet Letitia wasn't interested in the legend he was spinning for tomorrow's campaign trail. She was interested in the receipts, the paper trail, the ugly bones of how policy gets weaponized when personal grudges pass for governing principles. The audience could feel it too. This wasn't about saving jobs or making America great again. This was about settling scores, about writing laws in the language of vendetta, about reminding every CEO from coast to coast that no one is too big to be left out in the cold if they fall out of presidential favor. And as she closed the file and set her gaze back on Trump, it was clear. This hearing was no longer about a single bill or a single billionaire. It was about the future of economic freedom and just how small that future becomes when power demands a standing ovation instead of honest dissent. The real question now, pulsing under the glare of the committee lights. What happens to a country when loyalty matters more than logic and the rules change every time the boss feels slighted? The next exchange would decide whether this was history in the making or just another memo destined for the shredder. Sometimes the loudest answer is the one never spoken. Letitia James, sensing the momentum tilting her way, dropped the next document onto the committee desk like a velvet hammer. The official letter from the White House Business Outreach Office. Mr. Musk declines meeting. No public engagement. That's it. No apology, no explanation. Just 4 words that sounded less like a scheduling conflict and more like a silent indictment. The room digested it because this wasn't the language of Washington. This was the language of rejection, the purest shade of corporate distance. It was Musk, the one man who always had something to say, choosing, for once, to say absolutely nothing. But Letitia wasn't done. She clicked her remote, and Musk's own tweet exploded across the monitor's October 2025. I have no comment. The bill speaks for itself. Not even a meme, not even a GIF. Just that. A dry, withering epitaph for Trump's big, beautiful bill. The silence that followed wasn't the awkward kind. It was the kind that makes power sweat. For a few beats, Letitia let everyone in that hearing room sit with it. She didn't fill the void with cleverness, didn't offer a soundbite. She just stood there, eyes on the screen, and watched the country's most influential CEO do more damage by biting his tongue than any full-throated condemnation could ever hope to achieve. When Letitia finally did speak, it wasn't to gloat, it was to underline a lesson. Silence, she said, her tone a scalpel, can be a verdict. Sometimes it's the only verdict that matters, and when a man like Elon Musk chooses to say nothing, it's because nothing needs to be said. She let the point land, unhurried, letting every policymaker, journalist, and would-be kingmaker in the room realize what had just happened. This wasn't a press cycle. It was a retreat, a quiet, deliberate, irreversible distancing from the chaos at the center. A short Fox News segment rolled on the screen, a silent Musk slipping out of Tesla's Austin headquarters, dodging questions about Trump, refusing to even glance at the gaggle of reporters. The chyron at the bottom said it all. Musk walks away, no comment. It was the headline equivalent of slamming a door with nothing but the wind. Letitia turned, finally, to face the president himself. "Say whatever you like," she said, voice low but carrying to the back of the marble hall. But when a man like Musk checks out when he leaves not with a bang, but with the cold professionalism of someone who's seen all there is to see, there's no speech you can give, no tweet you can send. That makes a dent. He didn't have to out-argue you, Mr. President. He just had to leave. There was no glee, no showmanship, just the kind of brutal, factual precision that can cut far deeper than partisan fire. Trump, who'd never met a camera he didn't trust, sat back in his chair. His response came hard and flat, armor-plated with defiance. "I don't waste my breath arguing with people who retreat in the shadows," he snapped. "I debate before the nation. And the nation is listening to me, not Musk." His voice tried to project certainty, tried to reclaim the room. But for the first time in the hearing, it sounded more like a dare than a declaration. In that moment, the contrast couldn't have been sharper. On one side, a president who measured power by volume and airtime, still clinging to the illusion that every American ear was tuned to his frequency. On the other, a billionaire whose silence had turned into an indictment and whose retreat, broadcast live, said more than any viral speech ever could. The hearing wasn't winding down. It was winding tighter, every round of silence now more dangerous than the last. And as Letitia returned to her notes, you could feel the air change because what Musk left unsaid was now the question every business leader in America would be asking themselves long after the lights went out. Letitia let the bill fade into the background. Her tone sharpened, moving past numbers and legalese to something raw. We are looking at a president who once basked in Elon Musk's praise. Now, that same Musk has walked away, not even bothering to offer a goodbye. On the screen behind her, a clip rolled Musk in January 2025, his voice booming, "Trump understands reform better than anyone." Then, without warning, the screen went black and a single line appeared. "I have no comment." That silence filled the hearing room with a tension that statistics could never summon. Letitia locked eyes with Trump. Sometimes the loudest judgment is silence. And that, Mr. President, is the only verdict Musk needed to deliver. But Letitia wasn't finished. The screen changed again, displaying a series of headlines. Amazon CEO resigning from the advisory board, Oracle's founder pulling out, JP Morgan's chief canceling all White House meetings after the big beautiful bill hit the floor. "This is no longer about policy," Letitia said, voice low, each word carefully chosen. "It's about character, about a leader who, instead of rallying the best minds, has isolated himself in a room everyone else of value has already left." She paused, letting the sting settle, then closed her folder with a soft but final snap. Trump bristled, his jaw set. He fired back with a familiar defiance, voice tight. "This is theater. You insult the 74 million Americans who voted for me because they know one thing: I'm the only one who doesn't bow to the billionaire class." His words echoed off marble and camera lens alike, but for once, they felt less like a battle cry and more like the last echo in a chamber growing empty. Letitia didn't waste a syllable on pleasantries. She clicked, and a blood-red chart appeared. NASDAQ down 800 points in just 3 days, all because word got out about the big, beautiful bill. The audience could see the numbers bleeding across the screen, each dip another jolt of anxiety for anyone with a retirement plan. She didn't pause for effect, instead letting the stark data speak for itself. Then, without missing a beat, she switched to a report from Goldman Sachs. Policy risks from BBB force investors to reassess America's global position. The words hung there, heavy as a gavel. And just when the chill settled, Letitia flashed an internal email from a senior advisor. If he pushes through BBB, capital will flee the country within a single quarter. Her voice dropped to a rasp. This isn't just a president who frightens markets. This is a man teaching investors that reform in America means instability. The implication was clear. Trump's version of leadership wasn't just ruffling feathers on Wall Street, it was detonating the entire aviary. Letitia's stare never wavered, making it plain she wasn't talking about numbers, but trust. Trump's response came with a clenched fist and a hard glare into the mic. "If the market gets spooked because I want jobs made in America," he growled, "then maybe it's time for us to find a new market." The words landed with the certainty of a threat and the uncertainty of a dare, drawing a line not just through economic theory, but through the very notion of what and who the American market exists to serve. The tension in the room grew taut, ready for the next blow. Letitia didn't blink as she loaded the next exhibit, choosing her target with surgical precision. "Let's rewind to 2023, she announced, her voice cool and deliberate, when the president promised, "I will sign the most beautiful, the greatest laws no one has even dared to dream of." The quote blazed on the screen, framed by gold script as if history could be painted in glitter. For a moment, the hearing room was silent, caught between spectacle and skepticism. Letitia let the grandiosity hang in the air, then cut through it, eyes locked on the lens, her tone shifting from historic to forensic. "But legacy," she declared, "is not written with a golden pen. It is written by the people who stay in the room when you walk in, not by the applause that fades the moment you turn your back." To hammer the point home, she played a fresh clip from November 2025, Musk's face cool, voice razor-sharp as ever. "It's not about the name," Musk told a reporter, the faintest hint of a smirk betraying his exhaustion. "It's about the consequences. No theatrics, no campaign hats. Just a billionaire summing up the single truth too many in power pretend not to hear. Titles are cheap, outcomes aren't." Letitia paused just long enough for the meaning to land. This wasn't merely a dispute over branding, but a reckoning over the real cost of bravado. With a click, the screen shifted again this time, rows of anxious executives beaming in from all over the country for an emergency. Zoom. Crisis planning. What if it passes? Flashed in bold, desperate font above a digital Brady Bunch of corporate faces. The implication was chilling. CEOs, board chairs, risk analysts, none of them waiting to be led, all of them scrambling for cover. Letitia let the scene linger, then spoke, every syllable loaded with the weight of institutional memory. "You didn't draft these laws to protect the country," she accused, voice low but clear. "You wrote them to build yourself a monument, one so tall you thought no one would notice the cracks at the base. But now, Mr. President, it's the very market you claimed as your masterpiece that's tearing out the bricks." Her words didn't echo. They landed, heavy and precise, a verdict more damning than any headline or analyst's memo. In the hush that followed, it was as if the marble walls themselves recoiled at the indictment, not just of a bill, but of an entire presidency defined by the hunger for grandeur over substance. This was no longer about the politics of the day. It was about what would be remembered tomorrow, and who, if anyone, would bother to remember at all. Then, breaking the tension, Trump stood, rising with the stagecraft of a man who'd spent a lifetime turning adversity into theater. His voice was as hard as the podium he gripped, each word clipped, final, unwilling to yield an inch. "Legacy doesn't come from words," he fired back, his gaze sweeping the room, searching for agreement, daring anyone to contradict him. "It comes from action. And if cleaning house, driving out the traitors is what isolation looks like, then I am proud to stand alone." There was a conviction there, almost biblical, as if he believed that martyrdom for his own vision would sanctify the chaos he left behind. For a moment, the hearing felt less like a forum and more like a confessional, Trump positioning himself as the last honest man in a room of cowards. But even as his voice filled the chamber, the faces on the screen, the same ones plotting crisis plans, looked away, disconnected, moving on. Letitia caught it all, eyes sharp, ready for the final act. Because history doesn't care about who stands alone at the end. It cares who's left to sweep up the pieces. And as the lights in the hearing flickered over the fractured alliances and empty boasts, the question that hung in the air was brutally simple. In the end, what survives the monument or the cracks? Letitia didn't hesitate. She fixed Trump with a gaze that cut through the marble in the years of bluster, voice unwavering. "Since you deny everything, I've brought the facts." As she spoke, the giant screen behind her flickered to life, not with rumor, not with innuendo, but with a leaked internal memo straight from Tesla's government relations team. The words were impossible to ignore. Musk declined to meet the president because he didn't want to be associated with a bill that would cause severe damage to global markets. The language was clear, clinical, impossible to spin. There was no room left for narrative gymnastics or strategic ambiguity. For the first time, the stakes were exposed in black and white. No room for myth or distraction. Letitia let the memo burn in the minds of everyone in that room. But she wasn't done. The next blow came in the form of never-before-seen footage. Musk, in a private meeting with his board, his voice steady and every word a verdict. "Trump's bill isn't reform, it's revenge. I'm out." The chamber didn't just react, they exploded. Gasps, a rising murmur, reporters jolting upright, pens and cameras suddenly alive. For one dizzying second, Even the oxygen in the hearing seemed to thin out. She waited, letting the uproar crest and settle, then delivered the closing line like a hammer to the heart. Elon Musk didn't walk away out of fear. He did it out of reason. And that, Mr. President, is precisely what this White House has lost. Letitia let her words echo, allowed the meaning to ring in the cavernous space, reason abandoned, leadership traded for vengeance, and the country left, holding the bill. The camera zoomed in on Trump, not a trace of bluster left, not a syllable of comeback, only silence. His armor of words and deflections, for once, had nothing to offer. Then, Letitia turned away from the table, her steps measured, her voice rising with the finality of a verdict. A bill that was never beautiful, a legacy that nobody wants, and a president who, in the end, is left under the harsh lights, deserted by those he once called allies. As she strode from the hearing, the air itself felt heavier, one chapter. Closing not with a roar, but with the cold certainty that truth, no matter how long it is denied, will always find its spotlight. The story was over, but its fallout was only just beginning.